Good morning, and thank you all for joining today's Science, Conservation and Humanities seminar on Jamaican root tonics in New York City. I'm Vanessa Sellers, the director of the Humanities Institute at the New York Botanical Garden, and together with co-host Dr. Ina Vandebroek and our colleague Charles Zimmerman, it is my great pleasure to welcome you from locations across the United States and around the globe for what is the first of several workshops exploring the relationship of food and beverage to culture and identity, part of the Garden's new Foodways Initiative. I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Makalé Cullen, our Mellon Summer Research Fellow. Makalé is a cultural anthropologist specializing in the interface between culture and ecology, and over the last decades has researched, documented, and presented the plant stewards of meaningful places throughout North America for legacy institutions such as the Smithsonian, the Library of Congress, and Slow Food. Her fieldwork and curated projects in collaboration with several organizations have contributed to a more inclusive mapping of North American agricultural biodiversity, resulting in the restoration of multiple food landscapes and economies. She's contributing also to several books and articles on landscapes and material culture, and Makalé holds degrees in cultural anthropology from the University of Virginia and George Mason University, as well as a certificate in horticulture from the New York Botanical Garden itself. This summer, Makalé returned to the garden to collaborate with the Institute of Economic Botany and the Humanities Institute in an innovative ethnobotany study on Jamaican root tonics, a widely popular beverage across Jamaica and among the Jamaican diaspora in the United States, the UK, and Canada. And here, actually, to provide her short overview of this important collaborative root tonics research is Dr. Ina Vandebroek herself, an ethnobotanist, associate curator, and Caribbean program director at the New York Botanical Garden, who collaborates with Caribbean communities in Jamaica as well as in New York City to help document their traditional knowledge and preserve this important biocultural heritage. Ina.
I thought I had unmuted myself. A big welcome to everyone for tuning in to listen to a progress report by Mellon Fellow Makalé Cullen about our ongoing ethnobotany research in New York City. Makalé will talk about the work that we've been doing this summer together with the Jamaican community in New York City. And in about 8 minutes, I'm happy to provide some introductory context that is relevant to the New York City arm of this broader project that is part of the Caribbean Ethnobotany Research Program at the New York Botanical Garden. So when I talk about ethnobotany, I'm referring to the scientific discipline that is interested in the mutual relationships between people, plants, and their environments. Communities all over the world who live in biodiversity-rich areas are holders of important traditional knowledge that represents their biocultural heritage, and they're stewards of their biocultural diversity. And in the drawing here, I've tried to visualize that biocultural diversity is essential to all aspects of human life. So I selected this picture because the Caribbean islands are known as a popular biodiversity hotspot. But the Caribbean is much more than beach. It's part of a tropical biodiversity hotspot. The New York Botanical Garden has a long track record of plant research in the Caribbean that dates back to its establishment in 1891 through its co-founder, Nathaniel Lord Britton. And Britton spent many years botanizing in the Caribbean. And I myself have been working in Jamaica, that I've highlighted here on the map, in yellow, the island, in collaboration with Dr. David Picking at the University of the West Indies and community members across the island. So I said that Jamaica is part of the Caribbean biodiversity hotspot. And in the language of the original Amerindians, inhabitants of Jamaica, the Arawaks, the name Jamaica is Haimaka and refers to the land of wood and water. And indeed, Jamaica has harbors more than 3,200 taxa of seed plants and a whopping 34% endemism. Endemism refers to plant species that are only growing in Jamaica and nowhere else on this earth. So with this 34%, Jamaica ranks 5th of all the islands in the world in terms of plant endemism. And on this picture of the John Crow Mountains that are part of the Blue and John Crow Mountains National Park and UNESCO World Heritage Site in Northeast Jamaica in the parish of Portland. On this picture, I added the tagline of forest for those who can read the green. And I added that because as botanists and plant specialists, we have to go out and make voucher collections. So we collect plants, press and dry them, and then using loops and microscopes and botanical keys, we identify them to scientific species level. But community members who are living on the buffer zone all around the park, they are, through their traditional knowledge that they hold, they're able to recognize important tree species at a distance of 30 meters or more. So it's a forest for those who can read the green. It's also a forest for those who can read the lianas. And that is important because several species of lianas, together with bark from several tree species and roots and leaves of dried plants are combined together in these multi-formulated beverages that are known as root tonics and fermented. So for us, this might look like a lot of just liana, one and the same species, but these represent, in fact, different species. And in order to go and collect these components of plant components of root tonics, community members have to know how to navigate this slippery limestone rock and make long trips through the forest to get to these species. And sometimes these trips last a day or more. So while they're in the forest, they also have to know the forest intimately to know which plant species, which lianas, which palms can provide food and beverage, as you can see here. And that's important because it comes together in the root tonics. So together with Dr. David Picking from the UWI Mona and Jamaican community members, we have been conducting 20 interviews in 5 different study sites across Jamaica that you can see on the map as red dots. And the white circles that you see here with these numbers represent the total number of root tonic species that we have recorded by their common names from interviews about root tonics, which vary from 58 plant species to 114. And on average, a person who we interviewed mentioned 15 different species. Of course, not all species are equally important in root tonics or represent the core group of plant species. So I've put up pictures of 2 of the most important ones, and those 2 belong to the Smilaceae family. So it's Smilax ornata, known as sarsaparilla, and Smilax canalifolia, known as Cheney root. So this Jamaica arm of the project is what forms the basis for what Makalé will be talking to you about in relation to our New York City work. And if you like to learn more about the project in Jamaica itself, I invite you to read our open access paper, and Charles Zimmerman will have put the link up in the chat so you can click through and read this paper. But without further ado, I would now like to welcome Makalé to talk more about the New York City arm of our research. Thank you very, very much.
Good morning, and thank you, Ina. Okay. I feel like I want to thank David Picking as well. This is a picture of them in their book on Jamaican root tonics. I've yet to meet him. But as Ina said, this talk is very much a peek into a work in progress that began in the latter half of June. So we'll get our sea legs together this morning at kind of at a New York pace. And Ina just took us on this sort of hike into the bush and the steep hills of Windsor Forest in Jamaica, where she works, and gave us this really beautiful and thoughtful point of departure. And I want to welcome you to New York City, where the temperature is currently 90 degrees. It's very humid, and thunderstorms are predicted for this afternoon. And I'm having us linger on this New York City subway mosaic, which is a Jamaican mural, by the way, because New York City is motion. It's constant motion, like our 24-hour subways, and very little is static here. And so before we start to answer the question, what are Jamaican root tonics in New York City? I want to state the obvious, that we're talking about movement, about a human diaspora and a plant diaspora, and diaspora meaning people and plants who identify with the homeland and are living outside of it, whether on their terms or not, and it's usually a mix. And so what happens when people and plants move? How do their identities change in a new context? In farming and food processing, and very much so the making of fermented plant-based beverages, we talk about terroir, which is this concept that has global resonance. People the world over talk about the discrete and special flavors of their place. But what happens when the terroir is dislocated? When its ingredients are assembled, disassembled, and then reassembled in multiple places in multiple forms. And so this is kind of what we're looking at. And this New York City subway mosaic is also meant to bring you with me and moving a static frame of immigration as sort of groundlessness and shallow rootedness towards something that is in and out of deep familiarity and long held tradition. As Ina said, this is a long legacy in Jamaica. So my talk is in 4 short parts, vignettes, if I do a good job: place, people, plants, and then root tonics, building up the flavors as they do in Jamaica. And then we'll get off the train thinking about what else might be going on here. And before we depart, we're all here in what environmental humanities scholar Shreya Chatterjee calls the long shadow of colonial science. And so with respects to the Jamaicans that we've interviewed here in New York City, I'm going to start with some of the uncomfortable truths that we're standing on and that bookend every conversation that I've had with Jamaicans in New York City about root tonics. And I do this because bias remains active, where allegiances to institutional and colonial lineages forestall and erase important contributions of people of color. So while I'm working in that shadow this summer, I keep my eyes toward the bright light of Black men and Black women, 3 of whom you can rest your eyes on and mine's on too. Stuart Hall, sociologist, Jamaican sociologist, cultural theorist, and political activist. Marie Clark, an African-American botanist, and the first Black woman to get a PhD in botany from Fordham University, which is across the street from the New York Botanical Garden. And it's actually a bigger street to cross than you might imagine, because there are no Black botanists on staff at the New York Botanical Garden. And Georgia Silvera Siemens, Jamaican born, trained as an urban forester at Yale, and studied urban forestry policy in a PhD program at Berkeley. My friend and colleague, she lives and works in New York City. So this is a project of the Institute for Economic Botany, and it's not just an institute. The uncomfortable truth is that the whole enterprise of botany has historically been driven by economics. And everyone, and I underscore this idea, knows that, not just academics. It's a fact of the landscape in Jamaica, and who is profiting from this knowledge of the, quote, neglected and underutilized species, end quote, of Jamaican root tonic plants is a question I'm asked Whose frontier is this? There's a strong sense that while botanical gardens may have moved on from the extractive and violent practices of the colonial era, it certainly now sits within a paternalistic paradigm of protection of biodiversity from the same cultures who had the previous paradigm of extraction and exploitation, decimating plant diversity and families, cultures, languages, and ways of life. Plant-based industries were one of the main sources of wealth and continue to be for European and the American empires, as Lucille Brockway describes in her article, Science and Colonialism, quote, before the rise of the chemical industry with its synthetic substitute for raw materials of fibers and pharmaceuticals, botanists were charged with suggesting where to find a plant that would fill a current market demand, how to improve this plant through species selection, hybridization, methods of cultivation, and sites of cultivation, and how to process this plant for the world market. Botanists may be said then to have had a major role in making a colony viable and profitable. And certainly this was the case in Jamaica. Literature on traditional healing as a reaction to an experience of being colonized, and not only the direct violences of colonialism, but the feeling that your world is overdetermined by colonial structures, including the healing ones. Traditional healing with root tonics is a way to resist that to some degree. And this is a very common idea about memory, identity, and healing for immigrants. And now let's talk about Jamaican root tonics and these extraordinary plants in our extraordinary city of New York. So layer one place. Here we are in the heart of Brooklyn's Jamaican community in the winter time from the rooftop of my mother's apartment building. This is not lush. This is not mountainous. Yet Jamaican root tonics are being made and consumed in this different landscape, different climate with different seasons, and for people experiencing different challenges physically, spiritually, and psychologically. As a community member and grocery shop owner said to me, quote, we come from paradise and you know this place will kill you. There's no time for living here, just working, and we work hard. That's why we need to take the roots so we can make it through. So from this place, we are studying fermented beverages made from roots that grow in another place, very specific limestone soils that are in the hills of Portland Parish, where Ina works in community and in terrain of cockpit country, indeed the many soils of a country that is quite literally the tip of a mountain rising from the seafloor formed when the North American and Caribbean tectonic plates collided about 25 million years ago. Nearly half of Jamaica is more than 1,000 feet, 330 meters above sea level. By comparison, New York City is 33 feet, 10 feet above sea level. We saw some of that steep elevation in Ina's pictures where the plants are so skillfully recognized and harvested. This fermented beverage, these root tonics, are the terroir of Jamaica, and they provide layers of metaphoric rootedness and connectivity for some Jamaicans in New York City. Continuing on with place, here are the legacy Jamaican communities in New York City where we are doing field work. You'll see the New York Botanical Garden in Brown in the Bronx, alongside its Jamaican neighbors in the communities of Wakefield, Williamsbridge, and Baychester. Then southeast in Queens near JFK Airport, you have the Jamaican communities of Rosedale and St. Albans and Springfield Gardens. And then central Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Flatbush, Lefferts, and Canarsie. And of course, there are smaller communities in Manhattan and Staten Island's North Shore. But again, this is where we're doing field work for this project. And of course, this map has very soft edges. When you look at a diaspora, you should first spend time understanding the arc and patterns of migration and settlement, as those inform the ways people create access to, in this case, the plants and plant-based beverages, foods of home. And so quickly, in 1965, the Hart-Celler Act liberalized a restrictive race-based U.S. immigration policy that had previously separated families, including Jamaican families, creating an opportunity for those laboring in New York City to bring their children here. And those separations and reunions are referenced in the survey interviews I've conducted and Ina's conducted. I'm told of time spent with a grandmother or uncle in rural Jamaica, learning about root tonics, plant medicines in general, ERTs and such, while a mother or father was in New York City. So there's a strengthening of botanical knowledge sharing that in some ways has been, if not severed, then compromised by patterns of immigration policy. Another invisible layer of this map is related to home ownership. And for the Jamaican diaspora in New York City, there's a consistently high rate of home ownership. And I mention this because many Jamaicans in New York City start and maintain yards, meaning gardens of vegetables, that maintain their connections to plants. And when they can't do that, if they're living in an apartment building, there are plenty of mom and pop produce markets and carts in the Caribbean neighborhoods that people shop from several times a week. So we're really moving at a clip with this project, which started in towards the end of June. It's a scientific project is designed as an ethnobotanical survey with the emphasis on the plants and memory of what plants make up a Jamaican root tonic and what role the individual plants play, the medicinal role they play, which are the most essential if people still drink and or prepare root tonics here. And it's designed as a semi-structured interview, about 24 sequenced and kind of scripted questions. The youngest age of arrival is 11, and the most people we've spoken to so far, 15, have arrived in their late 20s, a few in their 40s and 50s. And the screening of participants is that they're born in Jamaica and have lived in New York City for 3 years. And the people that spoken to have lived here between 5 and 45 years. And people have interviewed have equally immigrated from rural and urban parishes in Jamaica, with almost everyone, having spent time with the granny or auntie or uncle in a rural area. So this is a snapshot of the population of Jamaicans in New York City by borough, and you can see why we're focused on the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. I know there was, we just had redistricting information from the 2020 census released a few weeks ago. So it's something we're all looking at. And bringing these numbers to life, I think Shelley Warrell, founder of Caribbean, which you should certainly visit. I think Charles will put a link in the chat, but it's also on the slide. Shelley really holds court when she says, quote, "No longer separated by sea, Caripolitans bridge the waters by forming new villages in diasporic enclaves like Brooklyn's Flatbush, London's Brixton, and Toronto's Brampton. For most Caribbean immigrants, New York City is their first encounter with neighboring islanders," end quote. In 2 instances, for example, I was interviewing Jamaican women who took root tonics and were knowledgeable about them. It was their husbands who were from other Caribbean nations, both Antiguans for what it's worth, who made the root tonics, but these Jamaican women still consider them Jamaican root tonics. Actually, sometimes the Jamaican part recedes, and what's privileged is either sort of a Rastafarian principles or the energy and intention and craft behind the root tonic. So that's part of the characteristic of being in New York City as a Jamaican, right? This pan-Caribbean heritage. And when you're buying Jamaican root tonics in New York City, whether you buy a bottle of commercially made and branded Jamaican root tonics off a shelf, or you purchase the dried plant material, you're going to buy it maybe from a Jamaican, but also possibly from a Bajan, a Trini, an Antiguan. And so how does this new pan-Caribbean village affect the range of plant materials that's used to build Jamaican root tonic in the diaspora? I don't want to overemphasize this because there is a discrete sense of pride, a very strong one, of being Jamaican in New York City, of course. But the larger question that lives outside of this botanical inquiry is, again, to quote Ms. Warrell, how do we have a Caribbean on our own terms after a difficult divided history, exploring all of our identities beyond the tourism complex, means slowly bridging and decolonizing our collective Caribbean experience. And so in many ways, as botany pushes into their frontier of a seemingly discrete set of plants, there's also a corresponding push towards a shared identity. As one person told me, these plants are familiar to all of us on the islands. We all grew up taking teas and sometimes tonics, and that's worth exploring. So just to say that, of course, in my neighborhood, Nina's neighborhood, there are definitely plenty of very, very celebratory Jamaican places, and this is one. But that's something that we move in between as we're doing this research this summer. So the plants, again, like the way flavors are built, that's something that Ina loves to talk about. We love to talk about together. We did place people, and here are the plants. Root tonics are made up of that roots, bark, wisps, which are also known as vines or liana that you saw in Ina's slides earlier, and leaves. And this is a question in the survey: what plant parts are included in a root tonic? And in Jamaica, Ina's been really gracious in sharing her data sets with me, and there are about 249 I hope I'm right, plants have been identified in Jamaica and the many interviews that she's conducted in collaboration. And in New York City, we have about 89 roughly so far. And the core group of plants mentioned in Jamaica are sarsaparilla, cheney root, strong back, 4-man strength. And what are they here? And I think that's something that's quite interesting, and especially to Ina, to me as well, you know, having done this work for many years. And as you might expect, there are a lot of differences. There's a continuum from tea to tonic. Teas are sort of up to 3 plants mixed in Jamaica. And for a tonic, there are many more. You can mix dozens. And the survey, you know, asks about the medicinal purposes of these plants that are listed here and their role in tonic. So, you know, pimento, some people say it's a seasoning or it helps draw well. Sarsaparilla, some see it's for hormone imbalance. Cheney root, very foundational, said to carry the other plants, aid in digestion, offer iron and copper. Strong back for fertility, counters anemia, supports the nervous system, as do all the lianas and vines. Some say Medina, ginger helps with indigestion, coconut root, urinary tract. There's so many, ramun, sexual stimulant, cinnamon. And so this is all emerging, and we're documenting it all. And I, you know, Ina moves between cultures of, you know, European and Jamaican science, as do all of us, to a certain degree, and there are multiple languages. And the plants used in these artisanal tonic root tonics are so complex. And I have had really interesting, you know, conversations with Ina. They're really dense linguistically. And I just wanted to create a visual that helps share that with you, what she's able to share with me. So one thing that's on here is the one-to-one relationships, right? Common name, botanical name. You have cheney root, that's Smilax canefolia. You saw that in Ina's slide. Milkweed, Pinocchio floribunda. So that is one-to-one. But then you also have these one-to-many and many-to-one relationships. So there's a lot of work that happens in understanding these plants. And these are the 3 categories. This is four-heart. It's one of the serranias, as you saw in the graphic here at the bottom. Also, you know, sometimes like a supplejack, 4-man strength. This is bloodwist, another beautiful image of Ina's that I couldn't not include. It's very evocative, but she also has photos of bloodwist that look quite different. And as she's explained to me, and I'm sharing with you, it could also be, you know, philodendron, heteroecium, and their Araceae family, Vitis tilifolia, Bataceae family, Urea glabra, variety Jamaicensis, in the Coneraceae family, Paulina Jamaicensis, in the Sapondaceae family. It's just, the point is that this is all, it's quite complex. And this is Peter Tucker with Ina in Jamaica, one of the a local harvester. He's harvesting cheney root here, and you know, people say you have to struggle it out of the earth, and that property of cheney root, its way of providing anchorage for the rest of the plant, informs what it's used for in the tonics, and also how it's processed. And so root systems are very much a part of the portrait or biography of these medicinal tonic plants, and that's something that people recall and sort of bring with them. And there are a lot of root systems, right? Like roots are organs of plants specialized for anchorage, absorption of nutrients, phosphorus, potassium, nitrogen, calcium, storage of food. We eat a lot of those roots, conduction. I mean, those are the 4 main jobs of roots. And I'm really interested in the morphology of these tonic plants. It's something I have to learn more about. And the root tonic makers that we've spoken with here in New York City have a lot to say about the minerals that the roots pull up, and how the process of making tonics provides access to these beneficial minerals. So what are the root systems of the tonic plants? I don't know yet, but you know, root systems depend on several factors, but the bulk of most fine roots, the roots that are actively engaged in the uptake of minerals and water, are found in the upper 15 centimeters of soil. And so then what is happening if these soils are limestone, as many are in Jamaica, and limestone is chemically weathered, it dissolves, it's calcium carbonate, and typically has a higher pH. But then again, we have some limestone soils here in the Northeast that only get calcareous with depth since you have so much rainfall. Given that soils in Jamaica most likely get even more rainfall and they're unglaciated, so a lot older, I'd be curious to see what the pHs are, because that would offer information about what micro and kind of macronutrients are available to the plant. And also with limestone soils, this insoluble residue of iron oxides and aluminum oxides ends up happening over time. And Charles may be able to put a link in the chat to more information about Jamaican soils, so you can see some of the references that I'm working with. And I want to thank my friend and mentor, soil scientist, Dr. Richard Shaw of the USDA NRCS, and Paul Reich, a geographer also at NRCS, Soil and Plant Science Division, for always supporting my questions with generosity and rigor. So I have this image up more of as a provocation, because these illustrate roots. It's all in the Poaceae family, right? But as you know, in terms of root systems, there are tap root systems and fibrous root systems, generally speaking. And so I was talking to Ina about the Jamaican tonic plant roots, and if there were any in the Poaceae family, and she's really great, and looked through her database of photos and found this picture so that there could be some alignment in this kind of illustration that I'm sort of musing on right here. So thank you, Ina. This is in the Poaceae family. It has the roots in the previous drawing, but in terms of the use of this plant in Jamaican root tonics, Ina told me that she only had 11 responses from all 119 interviews she conducted. This is Chrysopogon zizanioides, and Ina notes that it's cultivated around some people's homes, and not a deep forest plant, and then it's exotic to Jamaica. But the point here is that I just want to really share that I'm interested in the roots and in plant soil communication, and something that hopefully we can explore a bit further. So once the roots and the bark and liana and leaves are harvested, they're prepared and dried. And if you're also the harvester, maybe you begin from, fermenting, bottling your root tonics. But here in New York City, if you're making root tonics, you get your plant material dried, sun dried, oven dried. It's important what form and the process that was used to get the plant material here. And there's also something of the imagination, right, of memory at play when you get your plant materials. And this is the stall of Lumbe Mumbe Malimbe from Kingston's Carnation Market. And I like saying her name and her dancehall style, and hearing about Ina's time with her. And I share this slide though, because this is one imprint of hundreds, right? That as every immigrant knows, that you bring with you here as some visual of home. Because when you're here in New York City, in the Bronx, on White Plains Road, on Utica Avenue, this is what you see. This is how you wildcraft and harvest here, so to speak. And so the packaging then becomes meaningful. It's all relational. And there are different styles, rings of relationships in presenting and acquiring the plant material. Sometimes you have this apothecary bulk style when you have to engage with the person behind the counter, have a conversation. Maybe they're from Antigua or St. Vincent's, they're from Jamaica. And other times you have kind of what I'm framing loosely as like another tier, not that it's on any kind of hierarchy of good or bad, but just different. On the left, you have this image of medicinal plants used in root tonics that are, packaged. And then on the right, that are packaged and branded. The one on the left is a step beyond the bulk. I find these in places that also sell prepared ITAL foods and groceries. So there's some trust there with the shop owner that they have integrity with the wholesale supplier. There's no other information on there, right? I guess it's guinea hen, it's a chopped up, and then you have this on your right that's branded. So anyone, and this is in a retail store that sells home goods, clothing, self-care products, candles and such. So whether you're Jamaican or not, you can pick this up and have the plant medicine sort of framed for you. And then of course, as in Jamaica, you do in New York City, you make the root tonics. So we've looked at place and people and plants, and that all comes together into root tonics. And they're fermented beverages, and they're typically taken in these ways here and in Jamaica. You know, a small shot is a common way in rural and urban Jamaica. It's sort of like a vitamin. Some say here, and it gets you through the day's challenges, and every day is a challenge, right? So good to have help. Another way is as a punch, more to enjoy as a recreational beverage instead of a glass of wine or a beer. A third way is kind of referred to as a bottle. Someone we spoke with, Joara, said that it's something that you chug. They're more commercially made to scale, and you'll see them in a lot of refrigerated cabinets in stores. They still have medicinal properties and include some of the plants. They tend to be a bit sweeter. And then you have medicine, right? As Cecile told me, you know, you don't take roots continuously, you give them time to work in your body. And Cecile, another plantsman and root tonic producer I interviewed, Lee, said the same thing. He takes them seasonally, kind of as medicine in alignment with the moon, sometimes as a cleanse to release, sometimes to nourish and fortify. You know, as Lee told me, you know, you have to know your body and respond to its needs. And know the place you come from, because the earth that's growing the plants that you're eating is also is your place. And in terms of sort of flavor profiles, there's so many, and hopefully when we open up this for conversation, we can explore those. Some are smooth and light, like an herbal drink. The mouth feels kind of liquidy. Some others have a kind of thickness or pulpiness to it. You know, there's some kind of beginning, middle, and end notes of flavors. They really are artisanal, and that there's a lot of intention put behind not just the medicinal qualities, but also, you know, of the flavors. Some are a bit peppery and spicy. You know, my husband also says that some are, you know, just they're powerful, they're strong. You feel it the moment you take them. And so these are some of the root tonics available in New York City. Commercially prepared, again, at scale, for sale, not only here, but they're also exported to Jamaica. And one person we interviewed, Joara, a longstanding member of the Roots community here in New York City, said, you know, the commercialization of root tonics in Jamaica started here in New York, in the Bronx. And not everyone drinks these. You know, Joara, you know, makes and drinks what he calls a wood root beverage. But these are some that you take, people say, especially for kind of sexual energy, you take them at parties, they're recreational. And then you have these other tonics that you get, again, depending on your relationships. Maybe someone will pull this out from under the counter after you've gotten to know each other. And so they're very much word of mouth. Often people will make them for themselves or for their friends and family. And, you know, I think there's a sense, and Ina, of course, can speak to this better than I can, you know, but about, you know, I've been told, you know, root tonics, the artisanal ones, you know, they're put in a larger bottle, right? A gallon or pint or quart vessel. And then you take them home, you pour them out in a glass, and you sip them, their medicine. And I want to say one quick thing is that, you know, there is a long tradition here, and what we're finding so far in the conversations that we've had with people is that this is an extension of sort of memory and what they recall. And but for others, like someone I'm thinking of, Yaga, who I spoke with, you know, a turn to Jamaican root tonics is something that arose from living here. You know, Yaga told me, he says, you know, I grew up in Kingston. There was no grandma, no country experience story of how I came to roots. I was working in corporate America, and I knew that my insides were emptying. I felt empty inside. I was looking for a purpose other than working in corporate America, and I learned about root tonics here. So my knowledge doesn't just rest with the elders and rootsmen, but in the wider food and nutrition world, you know, end quote. So that's something that's quite interesting that I imagine will be something that continues, because even in Jamaica, I mean, they're, you know, root tonics are used in discrete ways, and depending on, of course, culture and tradition and where you live, but also your ability to access medical care. I mean, there are lots of class issues involved as well, and you find that here in the community too. So there's a lot of fluidity there that would be worth discussing and exploring. And I just went at such a New York pace, and we're at the end. Thank you for staying with me. There's just a lot here, and that's kind of been the experience, right, that I've had. And we're just gonna get out here at a beloved Jamaican-owned bakery that I'm very familiar with, where you get your comforts of home, your sweet potato pudding, bulla cakes, breads for the weekend, herbal drinks. And just to close, because it's good in science and good in life, just imagine and ask what else might be going on here. And I was talking with a colleague of mine, Chris Colvin, who teaches at the University of Virginia School of Medicine and is on faculty also at University of Cape Town, about a book from when we were back in grad school, and the quest for fruition through Ngoma. And it's apt because people, Jamaicans, Caribbeans, talk about root tonics as being African, right? And the book puts forward this idea that's not surprising, but worth sharing, that the things that go right or wrong with your body are in some ways a surface reflection of that deeper sense of well-being, right? Like of being on the right trajectory, of being right in the world. It's about spiritual wellness, community wellness. So when people come for healing, looking for root tonics, plant medicine, they may present with a complaint, but actually what they're searching for is a deeper well-being. And that's how these tonics are really described. And there's a kind of maybe necessary, maybe not necessary translation back into botany of that, but that's definitely what we're working towards. And it's also something that we see in public health here now. Maureen Biznano, the President Emerita and Senior Fellow at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement at Harvard School of Public Health, has been advocating for a new position in public health, from, quote, what is the matter with you to what matters to you? What is the matter with you to what matters to you? And Jamaican root tonics are very much a move away from the utilitarian biomedical solutions, that kind of, you have a headache and you take this approach, because in doing that, we've narrowed the significance of healing, and we've narrowed the process of suffering. We've narrowed its frame of reference into the biological and maybe the psychological, but not much else. And yet for many people, healing and suffering are often broader and deeper things. And Jamaican root tonics speak to that. So I leave it there. I want to thank you all for staying with me. Thank you, Ina, Vanessa, Charles, and I'm going to stop sharing.
Well, Makalé, that was amazing. And thank you, Ina, for your insights and for this inspiring presentation. Makalé, it was a really exciting first progress report on the Jamaican root tonics here in New York City. And it's good we have some time now, for about 15 minutes, to invite our audience to join us for this conversation and ask some questions. And for that, I'm pleased to hand the mic over to our colleague, Charles Zimmerman, who will be coordinating this Q&A. Charles.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Makalé. Really fantastic presentation. One person said, and I think I agree entirely, thank you for starting brilliantly and by putting this discussion in political and social context, and by bringing attention to the relevant scholars of Jamaican descent. So that was shared by Diana. Just want to bring that forward. But we have lots of great questions, and I just want to remind everyone in the audience, please continue to add questions, and also go ahead and upvote questions that you already see there that you really want to see answered, because we won't have time to get to everything. So if you see something there that you really want to see answered, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button on the Q&A. So we'll get started. We have a question that has, let's see, a lot of interest. So we'll start there. This is coming from Depretor. What is the opinion of the root tonic makers regarding the effectiveness of locally grown New York plants to replicate the tonic? And I think other people had asked similar questions about locally grown versus Jamaican root plants, and if there are described differences by the people in your study.
That's a great question, and something that you and I have spoken about. And these are really plants that are not cultivated. They're not grown here. They're wild harvested. They're endemic to Jamaica typically. So the core group of plants, and Ina, where are you? You can come on anytime. You know, they're, hello, my friend. So I asked Ina that same question. I was like, so, you know, and right on trend, like, are these growing in a, you know, raised beds in the community gardens? And they're not really. And so really not a comparison that we have. I mean, there's some things like ginger, there's some, you know, people talk about mint. There's some things that people can get from grocery stores that kind of, and Ina, come in with me now. There's the layers of flavor, right? So when you get to the aromatics and the spicing and the flavoring, some of those fruits or herbs can maybe be found here, but not really the tonics. Ina, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to add to that. And during our interviews that people said, you know, I have my link with the persons who I trust in Jamaica, who I know in that are going to collect roots in that area that is very pristine and unspoiled, and there are no chemicals there. And I have a lot of trust in the knowledge of the collectors that I feel related to. So that link, that personal link, I think that also comes back in our interviews to us.
Yeah, and I would say too, Ina and I have spoken about this, and when we've gone on interviews together, that people also they do talk about the food that they eat here, right? As being part of this kind of arc of this way of living, right? You take the tonics, but you also try to eat clean, and that's something that's come up in a couple of interviews as well. That, you know, yes, my mom gave me teas or tonics, or, you know, I take them, but I also really think about what I eat. So in terms of, it's not selection of maybe plants that are grown here, you know, like medicinal plants or herbs, but there is a very conscientious way of selecting foods, going grocery shopping here. So in a way, it's kind of tangential to what you asked, but that's a big part of this. It's all in a continuum of wellness, food, what you eat. Yeah.
Thank you so much for these answers. This is really great. We have a question next from Nacho. What has been the reaction of the interviewees about sharing theirs in your culture? Is it often open, reserved, empowered? What is your impression of that?
That's a great question, Nacho. Gracias. There's, I would say that's a kind of a complex question to answer, because it's really, I would just preface it by saying that it's challenging to do field work, anything that's relational, right? So it's about trust. Like Ina and I bring our whole selves, you know, to these conversations, right? And our relationships often don't just start and end in 45 minutes, right? So, so that aside, I would say that I've found it challenging, and it's something that Ina talked about, like to have a semi-structured interview. And I'm an ethnographer, and I'm used to doing qualitative interviews and participant observation over long periods of time. And there are all kinds of like real life constraints, right? And in any work setting, and also for many reasons, people are also busy, you know, and, you know, it's a scientific study also looking at, you know, plant materials. And I would say sometimes I feel like a little bit stilted. I don't want to project that on. It might just be me, because I like to have a relationship with and get to know the whole person a little bit more. So I feel like there's more there, rich information. But for the most part, people enjoy, there's room in the survey to kind of have people share a bit more about who they are and what they want. And I think we made sure that we included like, you know, you can be an author in this. This is collaborative. I encourage people to do that, to, you know, avoid the erasure, right? And so I think it's tricky to do the field work. And so I feel that, I hold that. New York Botanical Garden, you know, who are you? What are you doing with this information? It's the Institute for Economic Botany. I mean, like I started, you know, there's a legacy there that, I mean, there are reasons people shouldn't trust, you know, this enterprise, but at the same time, people also come forward and say, this means so much to me. And it's, in a way, it's, I don't want to lose it. And things are being diluted, and, you know, either in, you know, with these commercial tonics, or, you know, this larger medical system that's making us distance ourselves from our own bodies. And so there's a real also appreciation and eagerness to share. And I'll be quiet and I'll turn it to Ina. What do you think, Ina? How do you feel?
Yeah, it's a very complex question, and we could have a discussion just about this. But it's something that we need to continue talking about. I would say our conversations with people have been very much and asking, are you interested in answering some questions about it, and being upfront that, you know, who we are and what can happen with that information, that it might be published. What, you know, one of the things is, you know, giving it back to the community in the form of community manuals. But one thing, and I'm going back to the links, like the relationship information, who you know, and that goes even back from New York City to Jamaica. So one of the persons who we collaborate with in Jamaica, Steady, he has strong links in the Bronx. So, you know, when Jamaicans ask questions to us, you know, beyond where do you work, you know, who do you know in Jamaica? And that is based on where they live. For example, oh, do you know this and this person from St. Thomas? And I say, no, but I know this person. Ah, yes, we know this person too. So it's I agree with Makalé, you know, the ethnographic research where you have a lot more time to build that relationship is much better than the semi-structured interviews where you have narrow information from a larger group of people. But I think the links, again, are very important in that.
And I would just say one thing too, that it's been really interesting experience for me, because we've both brought these links forward, you know, and so there's you know, I'm bringing, you know, people that I know, friends, family members, you know, that, you know, into the study, as is Ina, you know, people that we know. And so there's you know, a sense of responsibility and there that I think is important, you know. It's unavoidable, right? So that's good.
Thank you both for explaining all the complexity there in that question. I know we could go on and on about it. Thank you for being as succinct as you can. We have another question. Must have a lot of mycologists in the audience. We have people curious if there are connections between the root plants and fungal mycelium, if there's any kind of research that you're aware of that connects to their health benefits, or the way the plants can survive. Any comment that you'd like to make there is welcome.
I'll let Ina ask, but it's one of the things I'm curious about, not as much the mycelial connection, but I guess so, but I was thinking more about fermentation and fermented beverages. And usually there's kind of a wild yeast on the skins of certain fruits. I mean, obviously grapes, like most famous, right? And what are those kind of colonies, you know, on roots or lianas or, you know, bark, and during the process of fermentation, you know, because that's just, you know, microbial activity, it's anaerobic, like what happens there. So I'm actually really curious about that. It's not something we've been really doing the interviews. So, and I'm interested in soils, but I would love to hear more. Maybe that's something we can explore, if someone can also chime in, if you know. Ina, have you found that
No,
the fermentation is related in some way? Yeah, what has your experience been?
no, the connection of the roots to the fungal mycelium, I'm drawing a blank there. I have not looked into it, not studied it, not heard about it in this context of the root tonics. the fermentation process, and also not being a food microchemist. But I agree with Makalé and the person who asked the question that these are really important follow-up questions. What we wanted to do with this presentation, and hopefully that is a take-home message, is the delightful complexity of these root tonic beverages, beyond the botanical, into the realm of the social, political, cultural. There are so many layers, and so it's a beverage, right? And it's so delightfully complex.
Thank you both. And we'll just leave that question open. If anyone wishes to answer it, they can go ahead and type an answer and share it with all of us. We have a lot of interest in whether or not there's concerns about pesticides or contaminants in any of the root tonics used. I know that would be a major problem in New York City and a lot of places, but also in Jamaica. Any concerns by the participants in your study and those kinds of things?
Makalé, you want me to start there and then give the floor to you? So yeah. From our interviews in Jamaica, right? So that is the motivation that people said, we're going very deep into the forest. Is this pristine environment? It's that's where the chemicals don't reach. So there is a lot of concern about that naturalness, that free of pesticides and pollution, and that's why people take these long collection trips. And again, it translates in the links, in the relationship of between the producers and the root tonic collectors, that they know this person not only knows this species very well, that he's the top-notch specialist, but they also go to these very far places, and there is a lot of effort and energy that goes into preparing these beverages, so that it's done with the most natural material that is far removed from the pollution of the areas closer to the communities.
And I would just say that building on what Ina said, that the relationships are really important. So when you're getting the dried plant material, I mean, ideally, maybe someone brings it to you from home, but there's a sense that you want to know the integrity of the wholesaler or the packager, and there's that trust element. It doesn't really leave, because there is something that's sort of missing there. So that's the supply chain, and the integrity of that supply chain continues even here. And I guess they kind of need to know, learn what's happening with kind of the bauxite mining. I mean, there's not as much. I think the sugar plantations, is somebody that interviewed Andrew, works in cockpit country, is telling me how he just got some land, is a repurposed sugarcane plantation. And so we're talking a little about the soil, and he brings some plants in, but yeah, what happens after bauxite mining? Like, how close are those sites to where these plants are being harvested? I mean, so many questions.
Thank you both. There are lots of great questions to get to in the chat. I wish we had time to keep going and going. I will just take a couple more. Is that okay with the both of you? Okay. So Eve is asking, where's the meeting between African knowledge and indigenous knowledge of the plants in Jamaica? And is that something that you've encountered in your interviews?
Yes, and I thank you for that question. And I think Diane was also asking a question related to tracing the knowledge back to Maroon heritage. So we've tried to summarize this complexity in our root tonic papers, the link of which Charles posted in the chat. But yes, so there is a relationship to the African ancestors, also the Maroons, but then also the interaction between the African ancestors and the Amerindians. So all these aspects come back in the interview when we're asking, where does the tradition of making root tonics in Jamaica comes from? And something that we maybe haven't emphasized enough in our presentations was that there's also this consensus that comes forward that the Rastafari community is carrying forward that tradition, both in Jamaica, this came out of the interviews, but also here in New York City. So also, so it's this, again, this delightful complexity of different knowledge systems and similar knowledge systems and traditions coming together.
And I would say, yeah, that people, they do, it is Rastafari here in my interviews with folks, but also kind of a, it's that, and also saying that, we're one and the same, right? Like we're, we are the Maroons, if you're talking to someone who's, Rasta, but, also that, it's their conversation. I don't know that Jamaicans always, they ask different questions too about origin, and because there's kind of a sense that that's a bit internalized, and yeah, it is really complex, I think, here too with class, and but yes, it is a question in the survey and something that people are very happy and proud to talk about, and they often are just very quick with it. They're like, why are you asking me that? It's this is of course what it is, but then you get at the complexity, right, in Jamaican society and here too.
Thank you so much. Maybe one quick question before we get to the final question. Georgia asks and is curious about the one to many, many to one topology. And it reminds Georgia of the out of many one national motto of Jamaica. And Georgia was wondering if that was intentional nod, and just to mention.
I don't want many. That slide is actually kind of a deep one in the conversations that I, try to have with Ina are as well, because it's at the heart of it, right? Like who has authoritative knowledge? And I think, you have this dominant sort of Linnaean taxonomic system, right? And we understand why that is the dominant one, and also the benefits of having common language to refer to plants, even if some of them are named, in an egotistical fashion after someone who found them, right? And but I think there's so much there linguistically around diversity and observation, and kind of the plants, and then also the community, how they name things. And I've seen that in different contexts. Obviously, Ina, in the countries that she's worked in, and in Jamaica. But I think it's a real issue, right, of citizen science, like botanical science. How do you have these conversations? What are the wonderful tools in botany and botanical science that can provide access to genetic information about plants? There's floristics, and I mean, there's so many things that you can use to add dimension and to the profiles of these plants. And at the same time, there's that knowledge that exists and has existed, and kind of before, during, and will beyond that, in a way sort of kind of just transcends all of that. But it's a big conversation, I think, around language, and it's quite loaded, I would say. And I think Ina's doing a good job in kind of framing it as collaborative and as equal, the two languages, but it's not always so.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, maybe, that the examples that Makalé gave, one to many and many to one, upholds these two knowledge systems as equal, because you have it go both ways. It's not that, the scientific knowledge comes out and is going to define it. You have the different local names, the scientific name, but you also have the different scientific names for a local name. So it goes both ways. But of course, in socio-political power, it doesn't go both ways.
That's true. And also something that's interesting, that we've spoken about is something like the nerve whisk. I mean, some of these have certain, secondary compounds, active compounds that have really different effects on people's bodies. And so, you know, within our species. So, I mean, there's some ways in which it is quite meaningful beyond sort of a kind of political or philosophical discussion, but a very physiological one, you know, why these scientific descriptions are different. And I think Ina's really kind of leading the way in science and in botany to kind of hold that. So, yeah.
Thank you both for unpacking that so much. There is no short answer. You know, there's just so much to say about all of these topics. And I think that's the theme. So this will be the final question, and I think it's an important one. And also a quick comment from Lisa. Makalé, thank you so much. Your stories of the people who heal and are healed by these plants are so important. In what direction would you take this research in an ideal world?
Thank you for holding space for me. And that's a hard question, right? Because you know, in many ways, I kind of entered into a project. I would say, you know, true to my temperament and training, that I would really make it more relational. I mean, I am very much a plants woman and would want to hold that information. But I think it's hard to answer that question right now, because I would ask maybe some different questions, some additional questions. That's a nuanced question for me to answer right now, but I have some thoughts about it, but they are connected to relationships and kind of location of the information and authorship. I am very interested practically in plant soil communication, and so I'm really very earnest and being curious about the root systems of these plants and the soils. So that certainly is one direction I would like to. It would be nice to continue, and Ina and I have spoken a little bit about that.
Well, the research will be continuing. This is for sure. This progress report was remarkable. Thank you, Makalé and Ina. The hour has flown by. There are more questions, but alas, we're out of time. Thank you so very much, audience, for joining today's seminar. If you have missed any part of this event or wish to watch it again, a recording will be saved and shared online in the NYBG lecture library. And those of you who registered will automatically see a link at the end of next week sometime. Those who want to still register for our mailing list for the autumn, you can sign up using the link in the chat at the end. Well, it's my pleasure to thank you again for joining us today. It has been a very inspiring conversation. We're continuing this as part of our Foodways research. And for more information for other autumn conversation, please stand by. And until next time, stay well, stay green, and take great care. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.